First of all, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, thank you for joining us this evening. Happy International Women's Day. Happy beginning of Women's History Month. We're absolutely thrilled to have these three amazing women join us tonight, come together to share their views on celebrating, collecting, and curating art by women of color. This is a particularly important topic that affects, actually I counted up, over 30% of the artists at Creative Explored are women of color themselves. We help at Creative Explored, help them deal with the kind of inequalities, also take advantage of the benefits and also unique opportunities women of color in the art world face every day. So it's a very appropriate topic for us to cover here at Creative Explored. And I'm so thrilled to have these amazing women join us tonight. For those of you not familiar with Creative Explored, for over 38 years, we've been giving artists with developmental disabilities the means to create and share their work with the community. And by community, I mean at large, including internationally now, celebrating the power of art to change lives. This is primarily through our studio programs, gallery, and offsite exhibitions, but as well with many organizations these days, we've been fulfilling our mission in new ways through online programming and virtual art exhibitions. On this anniversary of COVID, or we're almost there, we're incredibly proud and fortunate that CE is not just surviving, but actually thriving, and our artists as well. Mostly that's in part to all of you, our patrons, donors, and art advocates. Next slide, please. As you know, at Creative Explored, there's always something to look forward to. So before we launch into tonight's discussion, I want to quickly remind you that we're hosting our annual fundraising party, Art Changes Lives, on April 23rd. So get ready to celebrate from the comfort of your couch this year, bid on some amazing artwork, and perhaps even join an artist dance party, which is, we have some fun kind of remote events happening. Tickets and sponsorship are available via the link in the chat, so you can check that out. And then speaking of Art Changes Lives, next slide, Lena. And Women's History Month, we couldn't resist unearthing this photo from our CE archives to begin our conversation tonight. To quote our Vice President, Kamala Harris, "Our economy cannot fully recover unless women can fully participate, or participate fully." And we couldn't agree more, which is why we're gathering tonight to inspire all women, especially women of color. Tonight's discussion takes place in the context of the current exhibition, which is Maria Vidalon, Hidden Figures, which is now on display in the CE Gallery. Unfortunately, you can't see it in person, but you can see it online and via Artsy. And I know Elaine is putting some links in the chat. If you haven't checked out the exhibition yet, there is we have a curator's discussion online. But this year, to kick off our 2021 gallery schedule, we decided to draw attention to Vidalon's work because it was way overdue. Like the title of the exhibit, Vidalon often presents figures in her artworks, but she herself, an artist of color with a disability who does not communicate using more traditional language skills, is the real hidden figure in the art world. So we thought we'd she was the inspiration for this discussion tonight. So if you haven't checked out the exhibition, please do. Anna Maria, just a little bit about her. She was born in 1957 in Lima, Peru. She's been working at CE Creative Explored for almost 30 years. Unfortunately for us, Vidalon is not able to join us online. She and her family members are not as comfortable communicating via technology. Therefore, our interactions with her are a bit more limited during COVID. However, Anna, again, is the inspiration, and her work is the inspiration for gathering us today with some of these amazing female champions in the art community. Next slide, please. So our narrative begins tonight with the perspective on from an artist, Chelsea Wong, Bay Area painter and muralist. Chelsea, thanks so much for being here. We'll go into more detail in a moment. Donna Napper will follow with the gallery kind of representation and commercial perspective. And then Maria Jenson will provide an organizational viewpoint on how institutions are presenting and including art by women of color in their organizations. I've gathered some questions from other patrons of Creative Explored, as well as interested parties, many of which are women of color themselves, which we will be kind of asking each of you after we kind of present and see some examples of your work. So thank you for sharing that with us tonight. To our audience members, we do have a lot to cover in a short period of time. I think we could all talk about this topic for hours. There's so much to delve into, so I'm sorry we're just going to be scratching the surface tonight, but we will try to save some time for question and answers at the end, so feel free to put your questions in the chat. And I guess with that, we'll get started. So thank you again, ladies, for joining us. Really thrilled to have all three of you here. We'll go ahead and get started with Chelsea. And I know we have some, well, Elena will be putting some links to Chelsea's work in the chat. Chelsea Wong is a painter and muralist whose vibrant figure compositions reflect the diversity and style of her home in San Francisco. Her work is known for celebrating racial and cultural diversity, promoting working class communities, and evoking a sense of curiosity and wonder. Wong creates an encouraging visual statement promoting joy, acceptance, and openness to one another. Wong began her studies at Parsons and finished at the California College of Arts with a BA in printmaking. She's the first recipient of the Hamaguchi Emerging Artist Fellowship Award at CALA in Berkeley, and has recently completed a mural for the Facebook Artist Residency Program in San Francisco, and she's exhibited her art across the United States, Europe, and Asia. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for joining us. We're so excited you're sharing some of your art with us, your process. So I'll let you take it from here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chelsea. Thank you so much for coming and taking the time to be here. I used to work at Creativity Explored, so I'm a big fan of the organization, and it's an honor to be here tonight. Okay, next slide. So I'm a painter here in San Francisco, and a lot of my work is dealing with figures and people having fun. I'm interested in diversity and portraying people of color just enjoying themselves, enjoying the space with others, getting outdoors, eating good food, just showing people and women that life can be great and wonderful. So here's a painting. It's called Big River, and it's just, there's a bunch of women. There might be like 2 men in there, but they're just having the time of their life out at the river. Next. So it's important for me to show different people's backgrounds kind of intermingling and intermixing. I come from a big family, and I have 3 older sisters. So I grew up with, in our family, we had 5 women and just my father. And my family is of mixed heritage. So my sisters are half Black and Japanese. My other sister's Chinese and Japanese. And we have a lot of different cultures kind of coming together in our family. So it's something that I grew up with, and it feels very personal to me. And it's important for me to just portray this in my work as well, and just show that the world is a big, beautiful place where we can all kind of get along and just have fun. Next. So I do deal with some of the, other than having a lot of fun, I deal with some harder issues as well. And the way I do that is just kind of interspersing text in my work. So some of the pieces I have kind of, they're meant to be encouraging or meant to build on this sense of belonging or becoming stronger. So you can see some of this, these thoughts kind of intermingled in my work. And a lot of the times I'll show it visually, like as a t-shirt on a person. So if you look in here, some of the words say, have agency, brighter days, living fully, speak your voice, I stand behind equality. And this one is all about women and just kind of showing that sisterhood and that sense of belonging and sense of community. Next. And this piece is also about women. It says fierce women, strong women, women you can lean on, women, badass women, women who like to cause controversy, women. And I'll let you guys read the rest. I don't have to read the whole entire thing, but it's also about just kind of this acceptance that we don't have to be one type of woman. We can be many different types of women. And I think that there's something really beautiful in that. Next. And I just wanted to, I'll leave this, I think we can just leave this one on as Anne and I talk, because I think that this is also a really fun piece. It's acrylic on stretched canvas, and it's called Berber Rug and Marinated Olives. And you kind of have these 2 women just occupying a lot of space in the background and kind of holding their ground. They could be in a busy market, and there's chickens around, and there's kind of this guy with this little purse walking by. So we can, now I guess we can go to the questions, Anne.
Sure. Thanks, Chelsea. I just love your work. It's so fun to see this and see how you've evolved. Your work has evolved over the last many, many years. And now that you've devoted yourself 100% to being an artist, is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, I'm doing art full time right now. So it's very exciting, and it's been great during the pandemic as well.
Can I ask you, I didn't really prompt you with this, but what made you make that change to be, to turn into being gave you the chutzpah to do that? Because that's a challenge. It's so brave, but it's also been rewarding, it seems like, since you've done that.
Yeah, so I was working full time in tech before this, and there was a point at which I had to make a decision, which was to take on a really big artistic project that I was very excited about, or to continue working at my job, and there wasn't an option really to do both. So sometimes the scariest decisions are the most exciting ones, and I chose to leave my job and said, you know what, I'll just give this a go, and if it doesn't work, I can always work again at an institution, or whatever, some sort of 9-to-5 job. But right now I thought that, or I guess back in the day, and now I still think that I made the right decision.
I certainly do. I've seen the benefits. Seen all the different shows. Can you tell I'm a fan? So when your work is being promoted, is it important to you that that you are identified as a woman of color, or do you believe it should stand on its own? I mean, a lot of the messages you put forth in your work are about diversity, as you mentioned earlier. But how important is that you're identified as such, or do you like to identify as that?
Yeah, I do identify as a woman of color, given my background, and especially just the diversity of my background and how I grew up. And I think that maybe back in the day, several years ago, maybe it wasn't as important for me for people to know my identity. But now, as I grow closer to my work and kind of look back on things, and also as the art world moves in a different direction, for me, it is important to identify as a woman of color and for people to know that, because I think identity politics are really important in the art world right now. I think that they matter. I think that it's important to me, just in terms of, if someone's going to buy a piece of art, I do think that they should know about the background. I think it's something to be excited about and that people can kind of get into. So yes, it does matter to me.
And this is a little bit of a controversial question, but some, your male, sometimes you're, we'll ask, sometimes your male counterparts can still receive more top dollar for the work compared to women. And I just was curious, have you experienced this kind of discrepancy with your work, or how it's been shown or represented at different galleries, and how, and pricing wise, have you had to deal with?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that men still probably earn a lot more money than women in the art world. I think that pricing is really personal to each artist in terms of where we are in our own journey on the price scale. So I enjoy working with women gallery owners or female curators, and also male curators who have a lot of women on their rosters or are very supportive of the women that they work with. I have noticed, before that, I think I've noticed some gallery owners will only work with women that are kind of quote unquote accepted by the art world or already have that support. And I think it's exciting to work with anybody who's excited about my work and kind of believes in me and has that spirit. And in terms of pricing, I just think that there will always be, I try not to get too bogged down by the discrepancies, if that makes sense, in terms of comparing my prices to other artists. It doesn't feel like it's a worthwhile endeavor for me to do that. So I really try to just focus my own energy on my own work and, working hard, being professional, doing the best job that I can do, raising prices slowly over time, because that's the great advice I've been told.
Well, it seems to be working for you. Congratulations. And again, thank you for sharing. We'll bring you into the conversation a little later as well. And feel free to, Donna and Maria, to weigh in if you have a question for Chelsea, or else we could save that for the end. But Otherwise, I'll move to our next panelist, which is Donna Enad Napper. And Donna's career is in contemporary art spans for more than 20 years as a gallery owner, curator, and art consultant in both Southern and Northern California. She founded and directed a Los Angeles called Den Contemporary Gallery for 8 years, representing emerging and mid-career artists both nationally and abroad. In 2012, we were lucky enough, she moved up here to the Bay Area to become curator and public programs director for the San Jose Institute of Contemporary Art, where she created the organization's first ongoing program of participatory and interactive sound and art performances, and presented the first solo exhibition featuring an international artist. Presently, she is an art advisor with art consulting services for corporate clients in industries such as real estate, legal, banking, health, and technology. And Donna also currently serves on the advisory council of the and curatorial committee for Root Division, another one of our Creative Sword collaborators, and is the co-chairperson for the Northern California chapter of Art Table, a national organization for women who hold leadership positions in the visual arts. Donna, it's wonderful to have you. And full disclosure, yet another, everything comes back to CE. Donna's actually married to one of our Creativity Swords art instructors, Michael Napper, and so it's just fully everything. You can't, once CE grabs you, you can't get can't get loose. So thank you, Donna, for coming and providing us with this kind of curatorial gallery representative's perspective. And we'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Anne. Yeah, it's great to be part of the CE family in a certain way. And that picture, by the way, it's like pre-COVID. My hair is like 3 times as long, if anybody can see me. Yes, and I do want to thank you, Anne, and Creativity Explored for this amazing opportunity. And I am a big admirer of Chelsea's work, and I have visited SOMArts many times and saw some really wonderful shows there. So it's great to be on it with Maria as well. You pretty much said it all. Let's go to the first slide. So I've been working in the art world for more than 20 years, and I started working at some art galleries in Los Angeles. Before opening my own gallery, which Anne mentioned is called Den Contemporary Art after my initials, DEN, I chose not to make everybody say my whole name, so we just said Den. And this was the space in Culver City. The exhibitions that I put on at my gallery throughout that 8 years, I would say 2/3 of the artists that I featured were women. And from that statistic, I would say about half of those women were from diverse cultures. So I know this is only an hour-long panel discussion tonight. So we're not going to get into definitions or anything, but I would consider that non-white American culture. So that's what I mean. So this shot is an example of a group exhibition at my former space. I worked with Patricia Hamilton, who is a former New York gallerist, and Peter Nagy, who is a New York expat, who has a gallery in New Delhi. And we put on this exhibition, which featured artists from India. And these artists either shown for the first time on the West Coast or the first time in Los Angeles in this group show. The show included women only, from ages like 30 to 60. And Patricia and I actually connected on the idea of the show after she nominated me to Art Table. So Anne mentioned that I am the co-chair of the Northern California chapter of Art Table. And Art Table, if you don't know, it's an organization. The members of our table are individuals who identify as females, and we are leaders in the visual arts. So we hold a leadership position, I should say. So we promote networking and mentorship opportunities, and we also help foster professional advancement for women in the visual arts. So this exhibition, as I mentioned, I just had met the Patricia Hamilton at the time, and she was one of the founding members of Art Table, and this amazing woman I really, really wanted to work with. So I had the pleasure of working with her on this show. Next slide. So as Anne mentioned, after I closed the gallery, I moved to the Bay Area and was hired as the curator and the director of public programs of the Institute of Contemporary Art in San Jose. And this is, these are pictures of the first solo exhibition of an international artist that was presented at the ICA, and that is Leila Cardenas, who lives in Bogota, Colombia. And these are images of her show that featured this installation that was based on historic architecture in San Jose, and she also had several framed drawings on Mylar. So I was really proud to bring that diversity there. Next slide. And I wanted to include some images, just a few slides of representing my current role as art consultant, which I've been doing for like 3 to 4 years only. And my clients, as Anne mentioned, are businesses and corporations that are in the sectors of legal, banking, technology, and more recently, having a lot of clients who are in healthcare, and this is one of them. So these images that I'm showing you, they are from a project with a major client when I was working with Chandra Cerrito Art Advisors, and now I am with Art Consulting Services, who are based in Sacramento, and this project was really, really huge in San Francisco, and it's a major client who is very progressive in the industry of health. And this client, and when I say client, oftentimes I am meeting a committee, and in this particular case, the project was so big that it was 2 committees, and they specifically wanted to make sure that diversity was continued to be represented in their collection, but not just continued. It's really increased diversity. So the range of diversity. So this particular image is by an artist duo named TW5. They're both women. One is from Brazil, and the other one is from Sweden. And this is one of 2 huge murals that the artists created for this project, and they also were commissioned to do really huge images for 5 floors, actually, for the floor work. So we really worked hard on making sure that diversity was represented in the imagery of all of their work, including, I should have had slides from it, but the floor images, they included some text, which on different floors, it was in both English and another language. It was translated into another language, like Russian, Chinese, and Spanish, etc. So, this was a really, really wonderful, fulfilling project to work on. So if you can go to the next slide. And as I mentioned, this project was so huge. The client purchased several hundred artworks. So I'm only showing you a teeny tiny bit and just a couple of examples of some wonderful works by women artists. The one on the right is by Kira Dominguez Holtgren, and she identifies as a Chicanx, Punjabi, and Hawaiian mix. And she works with textiles and often incorporates materials and process that relate to her own background, the different heritages, and as well as some other international cultures. And the one on the left, some of you may be familiar. This is a piece by Hung Lu, an established Bay Area painter who was born in China, and her work was really became known for the historical Chinese photographs for the imagery. I know she is also focusing on American subjects. But this is an image of 3 Chinese women, 3 generations actually, of women working in an old stone mill. And I just wanted to mention, again, I would love to have shown more slides and more examples, including I had the pleasure of placing 3 pieces by the fabulous artist Chelsea Wong.
It all comes around. No, thank you so much, Donna, for sharing these, just a little glimpse into like your perspective on including women of color in different collections. One question I have is, when placing art or advising clients, how often does, it sounds like in the mural project you showed, they specifically wanted to focus on diversity, but how often does that come up in terms of having a specific gender or cultural background of an artist represented in the selection process?
Yeah, and it doesn't often come up, but the good news is that I have noticed that it is coming up more and more in conversations, particularly after the Black Lives Matter movement and the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. So those conversations, it's encouraging to know that those conversations are there. Some clients, as I said, they're businesses, corporations. I do see an increased awareness and interest in the demographics of their own population, be it their own staff. Sometimes these are really huge corporations with, tons and tons of staff people, or their clients, or their patients, as in healthcare. But yeah, so this is something that I try to bring into the conversation in the initial sort of interview that I have with the clients when we're talking about ways to include artists to represent their values, and we have that sort of conversation. Some of them, I have been having an increasing number of conversations with clients speaking about demographics of even the location of where their business, the building is located. I do, at this time, I am working on only Bay Area projects, but they range from San Francisco, Oakland, the Peninsula, and just Northern California in general. So, some will have a particular demographic that they would like to see some imagery or some artists that are included in their collection that speak to that.
Thank you, Donna, for sharing that. We'll get to a little bit more later on, but I want to save some time for Maria, who's our next speaker, and then we can all weigh in on a joint group discussion. Maria, thanks for joining us as well. Maria Jenson is recognized as a leader in the arts for advancing innovative strategies to sustain creative communities in the midst of rapidly changing urban environments. And boy, do we have those today here in San Francisco. As creative and executive director of SOMArts, Jenson has deepened the organization's commitment to racial equity, creating clear pathways for Bay Area artists to cultivate new ideas and grow their careers. Prior to joining SOMArts, Jenson was a key member of the SF MoMA external relations team. During the museum's expansion, and was the founding director of ArtPad SF, an independent art fair launched at the Phoenix Hotel in 2010, of which Creative Explored participated years ago. As a graduate of the 2018 Getty Foundation Executive Leadership Institute, Jenson is a sought-after thought leader on the role of cultural institutions advocating for a more democratic and equitable society. So Maria, thank you so much for joining us. And I know you have several projects to share with us, and we appreciate you doing that tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. What comes to mind right away is I need to shorten my bio.
Not at all. No.
You sit here listening, you're like, yeah, it's just droning on, painfully so.
Well, that's what happens when you do a lot. So,
but I really want to thank you, Anne, and Creativity Explored for, inviting me to participate. And happy International Women's Day to all the women and all the folks who are friends of women everywhere. And I wanted to say, Chelsea, I love your work. I took myself off video so I could have my mouth open to really take it in fully. And Donna, I used to live in LA, and I remember Den Contemporary. And I was also a member of Art Table. So I was just thinking how small the world is, how connected we really, really are. So thank you for that. And I just want to say a special hello to Ruth Burson and Amy and to Cheryl, some of my friends that are on the Zoom here with us. So I'm going to show you some slides of just some artists that I've worked with, and just artists whose work I would say in the past year deeply impacted me. So this is work by Lava Thomas. And Lava, if you don't know who she is, she's Bay Area artist. She lives in Berkeley, and her work has actually been seen in the National Portrait Gallery. I think she has some work also in the Smithsonian American Art Museum. And Lava's work tackles, race, gender representation, and memorialization through a multidisciplinary practice that spans drawing, painting, photography, sculpture, and site-specific installations. And drawing from her family's Southern roots and current historical, socio-political events, intersectional feminism, and African-American protest and devotional traditions, her work centers around amplifying visibility, healing, and empowerment in the face of erasure, trauma, and oppression. And so clearly, in this particular moment, this work speaks, to me. I think it speaks to all of us. And what's very interesting to me about the mugshot portraits are, just kind of, again, how Black women or women of color are, how we're thought of in society. And all of these faces, to me, when I've looked at them really, really deeply, I almost want to say that they feel like every day, like there's just, you see your neighbor, you see your aunt, you see a sister-in-law, you see someone that's very, very familiar. And that's also what's kind of, painful about, looking at these images as well. Next slide. And I had the pleasure of working on the San Francisco Arts Commission panel regarding Maya Angelou memorial statue, if you will, or artwork. It's not a statue, but, and I'm sure, I don't know if many of you know about the controversy that surrounded this, but this is the work that, in the not too distant future, we will see out front of the library. And the process of being on this panel and the process of selection and all of political kind of like debate, the infighting that took place, it was very dramatic, and it made national news. And what struck me through all of that wasn't so much all of that, but it was just Lava's quiet persistence to see the right thing done, to hear she's been used to painting women who have been, subjected to arrest and oppression and marginalized and all of that, to find herself as an artist actually having to fight a certain type of oppression, marginalization, or misunderstanding of her work and who she is and what she was hoping to represent, of Maya Angelou through this contemporary take on a statue. And that was kind of like what the debate was, and not to go down a rabbit hole with that, because this was a year of Lava's time, essentially. And she never gave up. She was like, she was like Rosa Parks. She never gave up. She never gave in. And I thought, like, what an interesting full circle moment for an artist to actually be painting someone who that's who we remember about Rosa Parks, is that she never gave up and never gave in, and here's Lava in a very similar situation. Anyway, just wanted to kind of, share a little bit more about, Lava and her just incredible strength to go through all of this as an artist. Next slide. This is work by an artist named Karen Seneferu. And the name of this piece is called Call Your Mama. And this was an installation that was at SOMArts from an exhibit called The Black Woman is God. And I met Karen right when I came on board at SOMArts. There was this exhibit with this really wild title, like the Black Woman is God. It was such a claim. And it was interesting how people felt about just the title itself. But it was a survey of over 60 or so Black Bay Area artists, women. And some had exhibition records. Some of them had, this was the first time they've exhibited. You know, the work ranged in all types of mediums and across disciplines. And what was interesting about this piece, if you see, there's a chair there, and there's a telephone that, you know, you pick up the phone and there's like this recording. But I thought it was interesting that, you know, Call Your Mama was kind of like calling Mother Africa, like calling your ancestors, calling, you know, back to the land of where we all, you know, come from. And this piece, this photo doesn't really do it justice. It's always the challenge with photographing art. But, you know, there's all these very small pieces of wood. And when you see it in person, it takes on the character of like looking at a city. And it's just an outstanding, striking piece, almost impossible to install. I'm not even surprised. I'm surprised it never fell off the wall because it's quite heavy. And Karen was born in Oakland, and her childhood was fed by revolutionary politics and the Black Panthers Party's free breakfast. So she earned her bachelor's from UC Berkeley, but she is a self-taught artist, which is really kind of incredible when you think about it, when you see her work. And her work has, you know, she uses like a lot of natural and manufactured materials that examine the ancient and the contemporary, and she turns modern objects into artifacts. And so it's like an Afro-futuristic aesthetic that provides this curative intersection between technology and the spiritual. Like this piece is kind of a combination of the two. And her work is grounded in the philosophy that space has hidden meaning. So her work seeks to enter into and transform the meaning of space, which is what this really huge piece actually did. It was like one of the standout pieces from this exhibit. Next slide, please. And this is a piece by Ayana Ivory. And this comes from SOMArts' most recent exhibition, Dia de los Muertos, which, you know, SOMArts has a very idiosyncratic take on Dia de los Muertos because we associate it with altars. And it's true that some of the pieces are altars, but, you know, extrapolating what you do in front of an altar, which is to spend time communing with artwork and really letting the images speak to you, you can have a very similar experience. And what I like about Ayana's work, especially this piece, is, you know, the title is Black Joy is Legendary. And so this piece was exhibited at a very painful time. And what's interesting about her, the figure is Josephine Baker. And of course, we all associate Josephine Baker with a sense of ease, a sense of joy, a sense of living in the moment, you know, all of these things. And so when I was looking at this image, you know, I thought about how important it was to recognize joy even at this, you know, painful inflection point in our country, because joy is also an act of resistance. And I found this piece to kind of arrest me because it was a moment when most Black people, I will say, I can speak from my own experience, we were getting a deluge of really well-meaning texts and emails from people during the Black Lives Matter protests and after George Floyd had died. And, you know, so some of it felt a little bit like, you know, we're constantly probing the wound because we have 400 or more years of mourning and pain that's part of our culture. And, you know, in this particular moment, there was a radical movement to just express joy. Like, let's just take this moment and let's just within this moment find joy. And so this piece deeply spoke to me about just the transformative power of art for sure, but how, you know, an image can also elicit joy. So that's what I have to say about these artists. And she was also exhibited as part of Black Women as God. And she's actually a designer, graphic artist, I guess, by trade. So here's yet another artist that didn't go through an MFA program. And one thing about that's kind of liberating for me, actually, to encounter so many artists that are so talented, but the work isn't coming from a particular academic lens or, you know, a particular type of training. It's really coming from a deep source within the soul.
That's thank you so much, Maria, for sharing all that. That in itself could be a whole nother topic, just about how so many creativity sport artists, you know, are not technically trained, and how the artwork has a different type of sometimes perspective associated with it. So these pieces you showed us were just amazing, and what the work you've done there. So thank you for sharing all this. I want to ask one question before we bring it into the group. You know, in the last several years, there's been this kind of growing number of influential female directors and curators of color serving in kind of key roles in our arts institutions, yourself included in that as leadership. What shifts do you see happening in the art field, and or do you see any? And if so, what role do you want to play, or do you think you should play in helping to develop the next generation of leaders who are women of color specifically?
Well, that's a great question. That could be its own Zoom.
I know.
But,
exactly.
I mean, I think about, as you said, that all the headlines that come to mind of leadership at different museums and, you know, big institutions kind of toppling, kind of like Confederate statues. And that's kind of the sense I have of it. And I can tell you, there still aren't enough female leadership in museums and in these powerful roles. And certainly there's not enough leadership of women in color. There's a tremendous underrepresentation. I think that there's been some shifts have definitely happened, but I guess my feeling about it, which feels a little bittersweet, is that some of these changes are coming as a result of someone stepping down or someone being forced to leave, as opposed to it being organically like, we definitely want to hire this person, you know. So it's bittersweet because the change is happening, the change is good. I think that as literally it takes more women to hire more women. And it takes more women of color to actually bring on board more women of color. It's a pipeline process. And I don't know if I'll see that change in this country where it's 100% an organic outreach to women of color leadership. These institutions have been around for a long time. It takes a lot to change a board, you know, because we have to think about the board level and their participation in this. At SOMArts, the work that I do is I literally, you know, hire people based on not 100% having all the skills needed, but having a tremendous desire to learn and having a desire to, you know, just really just show up and do the work, because none of this is actually rocket science. It's been proven that, you know, most of the roles that are at organizations, you know, you don't have to be able to at once be able to figure out how to get literally a rocket to Mars. You know, it's not that complicated. I mean, when you think about what we're trying to do in arts organizations, which is, you know, promoting artists, promoting, you know, curators, promoting culture, that's a very human thing. And I always try to bring the human or the humanity into the work that I do at SOMArts. So there's margin for error, there's room for mistakes, there's room for growth. I come from an organization where the margin for that was very razor thin. And that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on someone coming from, quote unquote, outside the dominant culture into a structure where, you know, it's about systemic racism. And I hope we don't get tired of hearing that word and think of it as, you know, just a phrase. It's a real thing. And it can't be addressed by diversity and inclusion initiatives, I'm afraid. I'm not a big fan of creating a department and then hiring people who are going to execute on something that leadership really should be taking on, the board should be taking on, the director should be taking on. It really is a top-down thing and not a bottom-up thing. So I keep that in mind as I'm working, at SOMArts with young women of color and helping them to find their way so that they can go and work at another organization. My goal isn't to just keep them at SOMArts, but I want to prepare them so that they're able to handle some of these more difficult roles just because of the environment that these roles take place in. So I'm what is the word? I'm pragmatically optimistic about how more women of color will be in these roles.
I want to bring Donna and Chelsea back into this. We just have a few minutes to ask maybe a question or two to the three of you. One thing that's come up with by all three of you is the Bay Area seems to be, at one point was a leader in the field of promoting alternative arts and or art by people from different cultures. I don't know if it kind of went away for a while. It seems to be a resurgence in terms of like the shows that you're putting on at SOMArts, the shows that Chelsea's involved in, Donna's even collectors are, a little bit more focusing on collecting art by women of color and people of color. I don't know if are we seeing a resurgence in the Bay Area, and any predictions there? I know that's not really something we discussed earlier in the questions, but it's come up as a theme. I don't know if anyone of you want to comment on that.
I think that it is a resurgence that's happening everywhere, but I don't think it's being led in the Bay Area. I think that the Bay Area is picking up the trend, which I think, I hate to call it a trend because hopefully it's just a movement, but I do see galleries and collectors more interested in works by people of color in general. So hopefully that's something that's just going to be the norm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I just, may I?
Of course,
Sorry.
yes.
I just wanted to add that I recently attended a talk put on by MOAD, and it was with the artist Alison Sarr, who I had admired since I saw her work back in the 90s at Jan Baum. And Maria, I don't know if you remember Jan Baum Gallery in Los Angeles, but anyway, so she is still active, and Alison Sarr's work is she's still doing well. But anyways, during the talk, she was addressing a question in response to the Black Lives Matter movement, and she had mentioned that she has seen this type of thing before with all the attention and in the 70s and the conversations and the efforts for the Black community, and for that matter for the women's movement. And then she just kind of like posed the question, are we going to be put back into the basement? So after the conversations die down. So it's a very interesting point because, and she went on to say, which I thought was very interesting. So it's not just about putting up posters with, certain faces for the website for the Black History Month, or again, for that matter, for the Women's History Month. It's about maintenance. To me, it's about maintenance, and it is about continuing to diversify. I think from the top down, bottom up, wherever we can have it, but instilling it into the conversation and education and maintaining that and being aware that of this maintenance. So it's part of our standard practices, regardless of where we're talking about women of color, people of color, BIPOC. So I just wanted to share that. I don't know if anybody was able to listen to that conversation, but it's really wonderful to
yeah, she's
hear that.
She's an amazing woman and amazing artist, and always on the pulse of what's going on. Her work continues to impress after all these years. I want to round up, we're running close on time. I just want to ask you all a kind of a personal question and something that's inspiring, hopefully, for all of our people listening. What artists are you collecting or inspiring you these days? And because I know people always love tips on who are you looking? We admire all your work and what you're doing. Are there any artists that you're paying particularly close attention to, or that we should be aware of, passing? Doesn't have to be a woman of color, but if that is the topic. But
it's funny, I was going to say, well, now that I've met Chelsea, I just want to just say I'm going to start following her. Like, I'm going to follow you on Instagram. I'm just going to start following you. And that's what's great about these conversations, because, art is supposed to be about discovery. And, I used to feel like kind of embarrassed by like, oh, I should know Chelsea. I mean, everyone else knows her who she is. But I'm so glad, it's just such a great feeling. It's very inspiring. And like, there's so many artists, right? There's so many, but someone that comes to mind for me is an artist named Angela Hennessy. Angela does really, like ritualistic kind of work that, some of it is based literally on, I know it sounds a little gross, but like human hair that has been, braided into these kind of like pieces. But what strikes me about her work is that it's really about grief. It's an expression of grief, because she lives in Oakland, and she heard some sort of altercation out front of her apartment. And she went out, like, most of us like to respond to that human cry or something. And she got shot, and, obviously lived and survived, but it put her on a different creative trajectory. And so I think that, a lot of times we're drawn to artists because of their story. Like, I hear Chelsea, I hear your story, and I look at your work, and it's like, you can't separate the artist from the narrative. So I think for most of us, when we look at artwork, no matter if it's a woman of color or a woman or whatever, it's just really, what is that compelling narrative too? So that's someone that I'm really inspired by. There's another artist, her name is Sanaz Mazanani. And Sanaz and I got a chance, I met her on an arts commission panel, but I was so interested in her work, and it's just absolutely beautiful and stunning. Again, it's a story. She's Iranian, Canadian, American, and has an immigrant story, but that's not why, I'm like following her, interested in her. It's just, it all just seems to coalesce, and the work that she does is literally beautiful to look at. Like, sometimes I think we feel like all of our work has to be heavy with messages sometimes, and it's kind of like, again, refreshing to look at something that just gives you a feeling of joy. And you can also still see the narrative, but you just feel joy. So she's someone that I just like her work. And I'll stop there, because I could talk for another hour about, there's also an artist with us, Amy, who does these amazing quilts. So Amy's I don't know if you see her, Amy Alstrom here, but she's another artist that's does amazing quilts. I mean, just, yeah. Okay, that's all you get from me now. I'm going to be quiet.
These are all valuable, precious tips, and we're putting links to these artists in the chat as well as we go. So I do want to wrap it up here in a moment, but Chelsea or Donna, do you have a quick recommendation of someone who's inspiring you in the arts these days, or not?
I can say I'm a big fan of Nina Chanel Abney's work. Every time I see it, I just think, how does she do it? It's so beautiful. Marcela Pardo Aritzia, who's a Bay Area photographer. She's really on the cutting edge. Lucchesa Verissimo, and she's another Bay Area. Well, now I think she's on the East Coast, but her work is very incredible. Maria Paz, Bay Area ceramicist. Liz Hernandez, and she's a painter. She just did a big mural at SF MoMA. So that's my short list, and I can type it into the chat box.
Thanks, Chelsea. I mean, in the spirit of what we're doing today, sharing the wealth. So thanks for providing all these great tips. Donna, real quickly before I close it out, do you have any?
Yes, and I know you only have a couple minutes, so I'm just going to give you one. It's basically Sharon Nishat is still inspiring me. And I think she's been on my mind because she's been one of my first favorite artists. When I was actually, I have a previous life, like as Chelsea mentioned, I was in the legal field before coming into the art world, basically in the 90s. And I saw her work at Patrick Painter's gallery in Santa Monica. But Sharon Nishat just stopped me in my freaking tracks back then, and she still does. And I just saw her show before the lockdown, and it was over at the Broad in LA. And she is happens to be a woman, and she just happens to be of Iranian ethnicity, which is different from mine. And she, you know, the work, whether it's her videos, her photography, it's just visually, not just visually stunning, but, you know, just addressing those gender issues and, you know, the cultural and the social and the political topics that is just very educating for me. Yeah, so
thank you, Donna.
Take my breath away.
Yeah, I just want to say, speaking of inspiring artists, we want to just close out the discussion, and thank you all for joining us. And, you know, just to hear a few other artists at Creatively Explored, you know, again, they are, Anna Maria Vidalon in particular was the inspiration for tonight's discussion. So we just want to close it out with a few quotes from our artists. Here's Christina Marie FONG and Yolanda Ramirez. I love this. When I make art, it makes me feel good because it's just right. I want my art to make people feel stronger and better. So don't think we can close on anything strong, you know, bigger statement than that, but thank you all. I'm sorry we didn't have a lot of time for question and answers, but I appreciate everyone who joined us tonight. We want to keep it to 7. You committed to that long, so that's what we're going to keep our commitment to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I just really enjoyed the conversation. We could delve into this much more, but hopefully we will be able to do that online in the future. So thank you, Donna, Chelsea, and Maria for joining us. And thanks for everyone for attending as well.
Thank you.
And come visit Creating Explored when we're open, whenever that in person, or see us online in the meantime.
Thank you
so much.